Meccano part number 118, hub disc, from the rocking 1950s. Hi folks and welcome back. This is of course another Aeroplane constructor build, the 9th in the series. All told, it's going to take me about 3 years to do all of them, so I'm not going to focus on the task as a whole, but focus on the script at hand. The single-seater Low Wing Monoplane. When I write a script, I start with a plan. In all cases, it's an internet search on the subject. In this case, the prototype aircraft, the Avro Avian. More on that later. Some subjects throw up very little, and then the fun part of being creative starts. That challenge of writing about something that I cannot find much on. It's not beaten me yet, but I can expect there will be a script one day that does. And as I looked in the source data for the Avro Avian, I was left in silent awe and admiration for what has been achieved with this aircraft and the names that are associated with those deeds. And I will try to do some justice to those people, and if, for a short time, their names are heard again before history opens to let them disappear, to be forgotten again, then maybe I've achieved some small thing. The Avian was designed by Roy Chadwick. He's one of those people that we see their work and are inspired by what they did, but yet know not the name behind the creation. Roy Chadwick designed many of the great aircraft that have defended this isle in its darkest moments. His work has given us aircraft that have achieved the impossible in the hands of people who are as great as the heroes of any legends. From the Black Buck missions carried out by the Avro Vulcan, to the deeds of the Avro Lancaster, the Lincoln, the Lancastrian, the York, and Britain's first pressurised airliner, the Tudor. All these aircraft, and many more, have his name on them. But maybe the humble Avian has achieved more, for it reached out into the blue sky long before the others. It flew where no aircraft had flown. It covered the distances to far-flung countries, over great oceans, where no one had dared to go before. When talking about this aircraft, you are standing in the company of pilots like Amelia Earhart, Bert Hinkler, Wop May, Bill Lancaster, Guy Menzies, and Winifred Spooner. And with names like this, I knew with this script I'd hit pay dirt. This was a goldmine. Amelia Earhart is a script just on her own. And like anybody who has an abundance of options, I almost couldn't make up my mind which one to talk about today. Because any one of these pilots, and even Roy Chadwick himself, have done things that will write a script. And almost I was lost in the joy of the hunt, overstimulated, and in need of tea to calm the nerves. As with many of these builds, I found the prototype airframe is nothing more than an experimental test bed, and the Avro Avian monoplane is just that. Avro built 2 as test aircraft. But they took the Avian and converted it for this test, and the Avian was a great aircraft, with over 400 being built, which also saw service with 7 air forces, 2 of which are in the same country, Spain. Unfortunately for the Avian, it stood toe-to-toe against what is possibly one of the greatest and underrated aircraft of its time, the de Havilland Moth, and in many ways was completely outclassed by the latter. But it is more for what the aircraft achieved in civilian service that is worthy of note. The Avian 581 was created out of the Avro 576 Autogyro, designed in 1926. The first design was fitted with a 70 horsepower Armstrong Siddeley Gennett engine. My car generates more horsepower than that. And while it performed well at the Lymph light aircraft trials, it was to be ultimately rejected due to engine failure. It was redesigned in 1927 with an 85 horsepower ADC Sirius and performed much better. A year later, Bert Hinkler purchased an Avon, registration Golf Echo Bravo Oscar Victor, and flew it to Australia. It seems an innocuous statement to make now. After all, we fly all over the world daily, and flying to Oz is nothing new. Qantas do it all the time. Out of interest, they are the world's third oldest airline, having started in 1920. Taking off from England on the 7th of February 1928, he arrived in Darwin on the north coast 15 days later on the 22nd, all but having half the previous record of 28 days. His first day saw the London to Rome leg, 950 miles. Then day 2 was Rome to Malta, only 450 miles that day. Then day 3 was Malta to Benghazi, 450 miles. The Benghazi to Tabuk, an easy day, 250 miles. Day 5 was Tabuk to Ramleh in Israel, 950 miles. Next was the Basra leg of 750 miles across desert. And then out to Jask in Iran, another 720 miles. From there it was out to Karachi in modern-day Pakistan. The next leg was Kanpur, now the city of Kanpur, in northern India, a distance of 850 miles. From there to Calcutta, a short leg of 550 miles. At this point the press seemed to wake up to what Hinckley was trying to do, and he began to get some media attention. Calcutta saw him on the leg to Rangoon, out over the Indian Ocean, a flight of 650 miles over open, deep water. From Rangoon he followed the coast to Victoria Point, and then arriving on his 13th day in Singapore. Leaving Singapore he headed to Batavia, some 525 miles, and then out to Bima on the east coast of Sumbawa in Indonesia, where he spent an uncomfortable night in a native's hut, being eaten alive by mosquitoes, knowing that in the morning he had the last leg to complete the journey. Out over the water to Darwin, nearly 1,000 miles of open water, no navigation apart from the compass bearings, map and pocket watch, no radio, no coast guard, just your machine, your skills as a pilot, navigator and engineer. No place to land if it goes wrong. He left at 4 a.m. to land some 14 hours later in Darwin. What Bert Hinkler did was outstanding. Just think that in many places people have never seen an aircraft. If you crashed, and many did, or something broke, you couldn't FedEx the part out to your location. After all, FedEx didn't come into existence until 1965, and you were the first aircraft to be doing this. You not only had to be the pilot, you also had to do your own navigating and be spot on with it. But you also had to be a mechanic, the engineer that fixed the aircraft, because in some places the internal combustion engine was still to arrive. I talked at the beginning about a list of people who all flew the Avon, and one such person was Wop May, a Canadian-born pilot. Wilfred Reed May, known affectionately as Wop May, joined the First World War in February of 1916 and was posted to the front in 1917. On the 21st of April, he was on patrol with strict instructions to stay out of combat. Being a new pilot, he was still to learn his combat flying skills, and his CEO wanted to keep him alive. That man was Roy Brown, an old school chum from Canada. Sure enough, they encountered a group of Germans, all painted in bright colours. Wop, true to his orders, stayed above the fight, as did a German pilot. And Wop did something completely foolish. He attacked, not knowing that he was attacking a fresh German pilot. a pilot whose cousin was in the scrum below. That raw pilot was Wolfram von Richthofen. At the time, he was transferring from the cavalry to the Air Force, after being encouraged by his cousin, Manfred. Wop attacked. Wolfram dived to evade, followed by Wop. Both plummeted to the ground, followed by another aircraft, an all-red Fokker triplane. The bloody Red Baron, Manfred von Richthofen, seeing his cousin in trouble, dived to save him. All of a sudden, Wop realised his trouble, but little understood who it was behind him. Throwing his plane all over the sky, more by blind panic than by skill, he managed to live a bit longer. But another plane had also fallen out of the sky, a Sopwith Camel piloted by Roy Brown. His dive was long and fast, and in order not to dig his own grave, he was forced to pull up. But the distraction of gunfire had saved Wop's life. Richthofen was momentarily forced to break off the chase, but then turning, he pursued Wop, very low to the ground, hedge-hopping. Manfred von Richthofen, the bloody Red Baron, was shot down and killed. Wop would go back to Canada, and in 1928 he'd take part in a rescue flight named the Race Against Death. A worrying call for help had come from Little Red River in Alberta. A case of diphtheria had broken out, and inoculations were needed fast. Wop took off on the perilous journey on the 1st of January in an Avro Avian, along with fellow pilot Vic Horner. They landed at Fort Vermilion on the second day, in time to meet a group from Little Red River. The flight might seem trivial now, but it was made in some of the most arduous terrain and weather to be found anywhere in the world, all flown in an open cockpit aircraft. Now, is that a journey you would want to make?